Amara Thompson was busy at work helping a customer find a book. She had been working at the library since college and really enjoyed it, but it was not her dream job. Amara longed to become a successful writer of fiction. As her customer walked away, she pulled out a pocket-sized notebook and jotted down a few character qualities based on the customer she just met. She did this a lot to help build characters for her stories. After work, Amara went home to change clothes before meeting a few friends for dinner. Her studio apartment in Buffalo, New York was no more than a tiny bedroom with a kitchenette and bathroom. Even though it was small, it worked for her and Milo, the stray cat she took in last year. The room was sparsely furnished with just her fold-down bed and a desk and chair she bought at a flea market. That desk is where Amara did all her dreaming. While riding the subway to meet her friends, Amara came across an article titled, "Tips to Improve Your Writing." One of the tips was to work tirelessly to improve your vocabulary. Amara's vocabulary was acceptable, but she knew she could always improve. She opened the App Store on her Android and downloaded a vocabulary application to try out. Before she could see what it had to offer, she arrived at her stop. The next day at work, while experiencing a bit of a lull in her duties, Amara pulled out her phone and began to use the vocabulary application. She found the application was very basic. The words were not challenging, and there were no quizzes to solidify her learning progress. The application had other features, but she had to subscribe to access them, and her budget was far too tight to add any other expenses. Over the next few weeks, she tried several different applications and found that every application failed to meet her expectations. They were cumbersome or had too much information crammed into one page. The words were too easy, or the background made the words hard to read. Nothing seemed to meet her needs and provide what she was seeking. In despair, Amara uninstalled all the vocabulary applications and was ready to give up and go back to her online dictionary. She was tired of trying applications that disappointed her in the end and felt like she was just wasting her time. The next month, Amara was on her lunch break at work. She was scrolling through Facebook and saw an ad for an application for creative vocabulary, a vocabulary application where writers thrive. While not expecting much given her previous experience, Amara downloaded the application to see if it lived up to its name. After exploring the application for only a few minutes, she knew this product was worlds above the rest. I knew many people like Amara experienced so many disappointing encounters with other vocabulary applications, so I set out to design a better solution. Starting with competitive analysis, I reviewed several of the most popular vocabulary applications. I explored the application to see what it had to offer and read through the reviews. Many people complained of technical errors and limited options unless paying for a subscription. While some were happy with the application, they felt it could use other options, like a thesaurus, being able to add words to their database, favoriting a word, changing the theme, and playing more games and quizzes. During my interview process with users of these applications, they were able to further pinpoint what was wanted in a vocabulary application. Using these interviews, I was able to humanize the problem by creating a user persona that represented the situation more realistically. From all this research, I created wireframes to direct a flow of how different functions on the application would work. I focused on wireframes for learning new words and adding a word to the database. After solidifying the wireframes, I began sketching my first prototypes. I made several adjustments to the layout and where certain buttons should take the user. When I was satisfied with the overall sketches, I transferred the low-fidelity prototype into a mid-fidelity prototype for the usability tests. Before beginning the usability tests, I created a plan. The scope of the tests would be to test 5 functions of the application and determine if they were a positive or negative experience for the user. The first 2 tasks I chose, creating an account and signing in, were selected because they represent the user's first impression of an application. The third task, The onboarding or tutorial was important to include to point out the major functions of the application. The last two options I chose because they were the most requested functions by users. I planned on allowing the tester to set the time and date for the tests as my schedule was wide open. The plan was to test 3 to 5 users, with each test being 10 to 15 minutes, with 30 minutes in between for review. All the tests would be conducted via a video application of the tester's choice. To measure the results, I will use Jacob Nielsen's 5 components of usability. All tasks will be scenario-based tasks. The first problem I encountered was a flaw in the way I created the prototype. It was not an issue with the way the application would function necessarily, but I did not include enough pages in the create account sign-in process, and it was very confusing for my first tester. I revised the prototype before carrying on with other tests. Going forward, I found several issues with the application. First, the font size was far too small. Users were having to squint and lean into the screen to make out what it said. Next, the option to get to each new word was to swipe up. The phrase scroll up was at the bottom of the screen, giving the user some direction. But some users missed this option and could not figure out how to get to the next word. The third big issue was the onboarding process, or the tutorial. Most users didn't like them. Many people stated they just click through the tutorial without reading it and then explore the application. The tutorial was just a nuisance. And the last suggestion many users gave was to have the option on the sign-in page to sign in with Facebook, Google, or another email address. I knew it was time to get back to the drawing board. The issue of the font size and the additional sign-in options were secondary to the major issue of moving from one word to the next in the learning process. I attacked this problem first by removing the scroll up option and changing the application so there was a clearly visible next button right in the middle of the screen after the word they were learning. The font size was increased. I also plan on creating an option in settings to change the font size and have a magnifying glass option so the user can hover over some of the words and see them better. After increasing the font size on the screens, additional buttons were added to sign in with Facebook, Google, or other email. Lastly, the tutorial was removed completely, but I plan on adding an option to the menu for help. Users will then be able to go to the help screen if they want to learn more. I knew there was more testing and revisions to come and was ready to proceed. Going forward, I will create new wireframes and prototypes for 2 more tasks and conduct further usability tests. The next usability tests will include the new tasks and the revision to the old tasks. Amara continued to use the creative vocabulary application for several months. She found herself implementing the new vocabulary she was learning, and it was increasing the quality of her writing. She was thrilled beyond belief and highly encouraged when she received notice that a short story she had submitted would be featured in a local art magazine. Through diligent investigation, listening, and empathy for the user, I was able to begin to build an application that would assist and improve many writers to come. I learned that by reviewing the competing applications on the market, I was more aware of what users were experiencing, and it gave me a better understanding when they voiced their concerns. I also found that while a lot of the same problems and suggestions came up, some people wanted things that others didn't care about. This helped because it gave me the option to meet many users' needs. I found it difficult to find users in my target audience. During this process, I did not have access to a large pool of users, and so I was reliant on people I know. However, I have a small social circle and my options were limited. I considered reaching out to local colleges and libraries with an advertisement for users, but was able to find people I know that enjoyed writing and could relate to Amara's problem. Through creating a faulty prototype, I realized if the prototype doesn't work right, it will render the usability test useless for that task. And lastly, I came to understand that what is obvious to me is not necessarily obvious to others.